Noswaith dda a chroeso. Welcome to the first of a series of special council meetings this evening. It's all being live streamed and will be recorded and uploaded to the council's website as soon as possible after the meeting. Can I ask all members to keep mics and cameras switched off until you are invited to speak, please? And for remote attendees, if you wish to speak, would you please indicate by using the raise hand function? For members present in the chamber who wish to speak, please raise your hand physically, and when invited by me to speak, press your microphone button once. Please also ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. With regard to voting on recommendations, if there is no dissent to a recommendation, I will accept the silence as agreement. If an electronic vote is called for during the course of the meeting, then advice on how to participate will be provided. So, agenda item 1 for the first meeting, apologies of absence. I think we've had some from Councillor Naomi Marshalsea. Are there any others? I don't think so. Oh, sorry.
Councillor Rees Thomas.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item 2, then declarations of interest. So we're going to do declarations of interest at the start of each special meeting. So I know we've got some for later on, but do we have any for this particular item, which is council tax premiums on long-term empty properties and second homes? Great, yeah, that's later on. Thank you very much, Margaret. None for this particular item then. So, Leader, can you take us through this one, please?
Thank you, Mayor. This is a very straightforward item. It's an arrangement that we've adopted for a number of years in terms of premiums being applied to long-term empty properties and second homes. So in effect, most of this is actually just reconfirming that. However, having sort of reflected on the policy, we're aware that there are some unintended consequences in that if you buy a property that's been empty for a long period of time, any allowances go with that property. So you could move into a property that needs maintenance or renovation and not be eligible for that. So if you actually have a look at the report, it talks of 2 exceptions being proposed, which would be applied to purchase complete after the 1st of April 2026, and that's an exception for up to 3 months or the date the property becomes occupied, depending on which is earlier, where the new owner is either not related to the vendor, there are a few clarifications here, or they can provide evidence that the sale has been completed for a genuine market value. And secondly, an exception for up to 12 months, or the date the property becomes occupied, depending on which is earlier, where the vendor of the property has already received a Class A exemption, and the property still requires major structural repairs. The new owner must either not be related to the vendor, or they must provide evidence that the sale has been completed for a genuine market value. The new owner must also provide evidence of the work required or the work to be proven by inspection. So very straightforward recommendations for here, which are as followed, and they are as laid out in the reference, and I would move.
And I'll second that recommendation.
Thank you. I think Councillor Marnie was first, so Councillor Marnie.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. To be honest, as far as I'm concerned, houses aren't occupied or premises aren't occupied, they're not costing the Vale anything, are they? I don't think there should be any surcharge. But the reason I have come in here is a recent case, not revealing any details, of where a house has been in probate, not allowing the relatives who'd inherited whatever to dispose of the property, which these probates can drag on for quite some time, as I'm sure most of you know, meaning that lady was not only paying her own council tax, but double council tax on another property that she couldn't sell because it was in probate. Surely there should be some sort of consideration in that also. Has anybody ever thought of this scenario? Because it's quite frankly a horrendous situation this resident found herself in, that literally didn't have the money to come up with all his council tax. Has any provision or been thought of or applied to these situations? Thank you.
I think we'll take Councillor Carroll and then you can come back to you, Leader. Councillor Carroll.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. The Council will recall that last year when this item was considered, the Conservative group voted against this item. It wasn't because we oppose the principle. I think it's eminently sensible that the authority works to incentivise those who own empty properties to bring them back into use. We're considering the replacement local development plan later this evening, so anything that can be done to bring empty or unused properties, which can end up being a blight on our communities, into use is a very good thing. As members will recall, I raised the case of a constituent last year who was a first-time buyer and had acquired an empty property. They bought that property with the intention of renovating it and living in it as their first home. As a result of the policy as it then was, and still is, that constituent ended up facing a significant bill as a result of the council tax surcharge. I'm therefore exceptionally pleased to see the measures that the authority has announced this evening that will introduce exemptions that I hope will, in practice, go some way to addressing this problem. I expressed concerns at the time that rather than have the effect of ensuring that empty properties were brought back into use, the policy had the unintended potential consequence of disincentivising people from acquiring empty properties as a result of the surcharge. I'm therefore pleased to see these exemptions, and I thank the authority for introducing them. As such, our group shall be supporting the item this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Johnson.
Diolch yn fawr, Dy Proi.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Just waiting for a couple of people to pop their headsets on here in the chamber. Obviously, I'm an unexpected speaker in Welsh. Thank you very much. As I have done historically, I do agree with the principle of raising an additional premium on long-term unoccupied houses. I also agree with the exception made for houses in need of repair following the selling process and those which lie empty for a fixed term. As a councillor, I have had to deal with, as many of you, with a similar case within the last year, and so I do agree with the degree of flexibility to fix this without additional cost to the buyer. Also, in the past, I have supported additional premium on second homes, holiday homes, temporary homes, whatever the terminology of the day. In the first year, after we considered this matter, there was a decrease in the number of qualifying houses, but according to this report before us tonight, there was a significant increase last year. The council recognised at that time 339 such properties, but this figure now stands at 544, some 60% more than initially recognised. I have asked officers for an explanation for this change. It's not clear currently whether this comes about because we are simply improving in recognising second homes now that this premium exists better than we did in the past, Or perhaps it is a genuine change within the market, and I would like to understand this situation better. For this to become clear, perhaps we should have a further conversation about the impact of the premium on the market for second homes, and whether it does help us to contribute to the stock of houses that are available for use by the citizens of the Vale. And so, while I'm not asking that we discuss this further in the conversation tonight, perhaps this is something worthy of consideration in the future. If the additional second home premium policy works or not, and what is the true situation before us. But otherwise, I do support the proposal before us tonight. Thank you very much.
Cynghorydd Johnson.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. And back to the leader, Councillor Lisbon. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, a couple of interesting things. I mean, we are always keen to reflect, work out what's working, what's not working. I think hence the details on house purchases, and we could see that was disadvantaging people. In terms of probate, that there are again there are a few different issues to be discussed there, and I'm sure that the head of finance would be happy to talk you through that. The number of houses or properties that go well beyond the various premiums is relatively small. But we're happy to talk you through how that works in terms of the probate system. We are very happy to hold any premiums over until the property is sold in probate, and then actually those council tax charges can be settled within the probate arrangements. In terms of, thank you, Councillor Johnson, for recognising the change, and I think actually, sorry, Councillor Carroll, I think Councillor Johnson, it actually might be a good idea to have a look at how the system is working now that we've had it in for so long, particularly when you look at second homes. It's a question of whether or not people are retaining them and paying council tax on them, or whether or not they are actually running them as a holiday home, and in which case they might be turning over to business rates. That's actually happened in quite a few areas where, depending on the level of lets that people are achieving, that there's one side or the other. But also, I think it would be worthwhile having a look at how our empty home policies are working. I'm very fortunate that our officers work very successfully to renovate and force the sale of an empty property in my ward, which has now come back into use. And that property was a blight on so many people for so long. So I think that there's quite a wide number of contributory factors to this, and maybe before this comes back to us next year, that we might want to actually have a look and see whether or not there are any other tweaks that we want to make. So I think with those provisos, I think that I'll reconfirm the recommendations.
Thank you, Leader. I don't detect any dissent. If I'm wrong, now's the time to say something, but I think that's approved. We've got to wait until past to start the next
You've got a minute.
special meeting. I could try and fill. Okay, it's now past, so we can carry on with the next special meeting. So again, apologies are the same as for the first. Declarations of interest, do we have any, and what are their nature for the second special meeting surrounding this single item council tax reduction? I'm not aware of any that need to be made. So it's to the leader again then to consider council tax reduction scheme. Can you take us through this, please?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And this is an incredibly simple report because, in fact, this is about the readoption of the scheme that has actually been in operations since 2013 and continues the existing limited discretions that we apply. And that is that we allow extended payments of the council tax reduction scheme for up to a maximum of 4 weeks for people return to work where they've previously been receiving the reduction, which is ending because of their return to work. So basically, it's the month in hand type thing to make sure people aren't out of pocket. That we disregard war widow and war disablement pensions in assessing income, and that we allow backdated council tax reduction scheme for a period of up to 26 weeks. This is coming here today because it must be approved by council by the 31st of this month for implementation from the 1st of April this year. And on that basis, I would move.
And I'll second that recommendation.
If nobody wants to speak, then I'll again assume that the report is approved and bring this second special meeting to a close. So we do have a little break now of 11 or 12 minutes. Is that right? Yeah. We've got to wait until 6:30. Diolch. Mae'n hanner awr wedi 6. It's 6:30. We're going to resume our series of special meetings. So please be seated. So declarations of interest for the next special meeting, which is the housing revenue account and rent setting. Several have been provided ahead of the meeting by those councillors who are also council tenants. So Councillor Julie Aviett, Councillor William Hennessy, Councillor Julie Lynch-Wilson and Councillor Margaret Wilkinson have all declared their interest, and it's not prejudicial, and they have dispensation from the Standards Committee to take part should they wish to do so. I think Councillor Emma Goodjohn would also like to declare an interest.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'd like to declare a personal and prejudicial interest as a member of the New Earth Housing Association Board. I've dispensation to speak and vote as agreed by the Standards Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so, oh, sorry.
Margaret, do you put your mic on, please? Do you put your mic on, please?
I think it's on. Do I have to declare that my son and my granddaughter works for the council? So can I declare my son and my granddaughter works for the council, please?
Thanks, Margaret. That's great. You have. Thank you. Right. If there are no other declarations of interest, we will ask the leader to take us through this particular item.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, this item, the final housing revenue account, budget proposals for 26-27, rent setting for 26-27, and the housing revenue account business plan 26-27. That came from, it was a reference from Cabinet on the 8th of January, having been to the Place Scrutiny Committee on the 6th of January. The recommendation from, or reference from, the Scrutiny Committee was reported verbally at Cabinet, and there's been a supplementary item distributed today, which members should have as well. So it's the usual system whereby we have to lay out a 30-year business plan and then set our charges and rents according to that for agreement before, I have to double check when it is. We have to notify the government, Welsh Government, imminently. I haven't got that in my notes. Welsh Government consulted on its rent policy over the summer and made some minor changes to arrangement around rent setting. And they talk about CPI, the CPI interest level, plus a 0.5% cap in place, where CPI was between 3 and 5%. So due to complexity, affordability remains at the heart of its policy. So with that, we are looking at the CPI plus 0.5% to support the housing business plan. And to my understanding, as far as I am aware with the information to hand, there is only one local authority in Wales that isn't going to the full 4.3% cap, and that is basically because that they are very close to the local housing allowance rates, and so they are restricted in terms of their ability. I think there was something in terms of the discussion at the Place Scrutiny Committee about whether, about going to the maximum. And I think what I need to clarify here is that if you have a look the easiest place to have a look is on the is in the recommendations, where it's talking about the cost of services that we provide to our tenants. And what you will see there is we are intending to propose the services are actually set on what they cost us. So some of those services have gone down as others that have gone up depending upon affordability. There were also questions in terms of affordability at the scrutiny committee. I do have some information, but I'm not totally sure of whether or not I can circulate. I have asked that question at the moment. As soon as I have a clarification, I will circulate it. But in excess, it was mentioned at scrutiny that we are in the middle in terms of affordability in comparison with other Welsh councils. The common affordability benchmark is that rent should not be more than 30 to 33% of average income. And the proposed rent for a 3-bedroom house in the Vale is about 13.8%. And it's recognised that within Wales it goes somewhere between 12 and 17%, so it's pretty well in the middle. And the average income in the Vale for a 1-bedroom house is around 26% of average income. And that virtually is not quite in the middle, it's just below middle. Is the averages are between 22 and 32%. And as I said, that goes right across all councils in Wales. But as I said, as soon as I get agreement in terms of letting out those figures, because it actually gives the details for each council, and whether that is something that's been acquired through a network or whether it's something that is public, we will get that circulated to members. So the recommendations that are before us here are fairly similar, except just for numbers, for this report. And the first recommendation is that the final housing revenue account budget proposals for 26-27 set out below, and that is on the first page of the reference that's come in, and it's at the bottom of page 2 at the start of page 3, be approved. The second one is that the average rent increase of 4.3% as set out in paragraphs 2.24 be approved. Thirdly, that full council approves the increase suggested for other services as set out in the table below and in paragraphs 2.26 to 2.34. And as I said, some of those go up, some of those go down. Fourth, that full council be recommended to approve all changes to rents and service charges be implemented from the 1st of April 2026, with the first week of April being a non-chargeable rent week, and that increase notices are sent to tenants 2 months in advance of the new charges coming into effect, as required by the Rented Homes Wales Act. The recommendations 5 and 6 on it are both cabinet recommendations, and that recommendation 7 said that further to recommendation from Place Scrutiny Committee on the 6th of January 2026, information be provided to members prior to discussion at full council on 12th of January 2026 to clarify the affordability criteria within the report in relation to the proposed rent increases, and that the information should include details on average rent increase levels set by registered social landlord partners. And I had omitted that, and what I would say is rent increases in terms of percentage match ours, but as the registered social landlords in the Vale actually have higher rent levels, then that 4.3% would actually end up as being a higher level. So those are the recommendations before us. As I said, I will forward the paper copies as soon as I have agreement from the parties involved that I can do so, and I'd move those recommendations.
And I'll second those recommendations.
Cynghorydd Johnson.
Diolch yn
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. The housing revenue account is more complex than it might appear at first glance. The first time it was described to me, I understood it to be ring-fenced by tenants' rent contribution within council houses in order to pay for services to assist tenants, such as home repairs, and also helping to build services in areas with a high concentration of council homes. But by now, it's very easy to explain. People pay into the pot, and in return they receive a service. And so, without the incentive of a profit, traditionally the rent, of course, is less than it is in the private rental sector. And so, we must consider the number of citizens who are on the waiting list, and we must accept that the council sector remains a more attractive prospect compared to the private rental sector. The council's rent is lower than that also of social landlords. This is because, as the leader has said, of their business model as non-profit organisations who utilise the flow of money from present tenants for the upkeep of present houses and for the building of more houses in the future. During the scrutiny meeting last week, the leader described the council as a social enterprise. And this is true, because by now we do operate in the same vein. But, as a principle, is this a fair way to treat council tenants as a single group and not like families or households individually? In my ward, the ward of Buttrils in the centre of Barry, over 10% of houses there are council houses. They are 50 years old, 70 years old, or even 90 years old. The original investment, the expenditure, has been repaid by many decades now, but the tenants continue to pay thousands each year for a council asset. Of course, tenants deserve investments such as WHQS and decarbonisation, but they continue to pay for the service years after the council has paid off the asset. And here lies the complication. People are paying in for many years, paying more than is needed for the council to build more homes. I understand the argument on a social level, but on an individual level, it becomes much more difficult to justify. I'd like to emphasise at this point that I do support the council's plan to build a significant number of council houses here in the Vale. I welcome the changes put forward by Welsh Government, considering the substantial impact of inflation on tenants, and so only putting a ceiling of CPI of 0.5% compared to 1% in the past, but this continues to be unfair. Perhaps this is because it uses an inflation metric which differs substantially from the true expenditure that is needed year on year. The council this year is asking councils for the maximum amounts once again that is allowed by Welsh Government's regulations. I understand this. I understand that a lot of tenants aren't paying a very large rent, but it still strikes me as unfair that is the people footing the bill for this, and we're not sure what sort of situation they are facing. If I can just turn very briefly to the point made by the leader, during the scrutiny meeting last week, a part of the presentation suggested that the council, in terms of affordability, had scored an 11 out of 22 in the ranking of councils, but of course there are only 11 local authorities in Wales who are continuing with this, and this was the question that Councillor Cooper was keen to ask for an explanation for last week, which is what is the relationship between being 11th out of 22 if only 11 have a stock of council houses. So as we have heard, we are going to be voting on this rent increase before we have the information which sits behind that declaration. Thank you very much.
Diolch, Cynghorydd Johnson.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson.
Mark Wilson, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of points there. I know Councillor Johnson referred to houses which obviously have been, I suppose, if they're equivalent houses in mortgage, they would have been paid off. if you're talking about a house more than 25 years old, lots of us have had houses which mortgaged 25 years plus, and I accept that they would have been paid off. But on the other hand, as you know and I know, when you're an owner, you pay for repairs. And of course, who pays for repairs? Is that the actual housing department, the building service department, which I'm responsible for, basically funds those repairs and repairs those properties. And really, the rent helps pay off those repairs. And clearly, we do it in a very efficient and speedy manner. I know that the leader has referred to an example which occurred fairly recently in Penarth, where someone responded my department responded very quickly. And sometimes you don't get that service anywhere else. And I'm very proud of building services and what they do in terms of doing very quick repairs to lots of vulnerable people in our communities. And we really helped fund that. And, and I think that's something that we do very well out. And as you rightly said in your speech, Councillor Johnson, that our rental levels are very low, lower than other RSLs within the area. And that's very laudable, and that's something that I will continue to support. But I think we also got to bear in mind that the housing revenue account is an account that's got to be resilient, and it's got to be sustainable. And it's also got to be sustainable for the future, because we've got to be looking to improve our housing stock and to make sure we're trying to reduce the amount of bills that people pay. And therefore, we continue to invest in our existing stock, as well as hopefully funds for new stock as well.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor George Carroll.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. As with all decisions, it's important that fairness and equity are the principles behind those that we take when deciding how to set council rents. Clearly, there have been increases in costs to the council of providing accommodation. That's obvious. CPI inflation, for example, is up on the past year, as one would expect. And so I think it is reasonable to increase the rents to take account of that. But from a personal point of view, I'm uncomfortable with the idea of increasing rents at a rate above inflation. Typically, when I look at the council tax rise, I approach the matter from the principle that we should freeze council tax in real terms, i.e. increase it by the CPI rate of inflation. And so I think that that should be the approach by which we approach this matter. So I shall be opposing the proposed increase. I think that it should be at inflation.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Leader, would you like to come back? I don't think anybody else has got their hand up.
If there's no one else,
Sorry, apologies.
There
Sandra
are,
Perks. Councillor Sandra Perks, my fault.
Oh, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Obviously, this falls under my cabinet position as well. And what I would say is the rent that is charged, as everyone else has said, is some of the lowest within the Vale of Glamorgan and within, sort of our other social landlords and other councils as well. And we were talking about also deprived areas, I think, when we talked about this and within other scrutiny committees. And I think what we have to realise is that, we make the rents as affordable as possible. Also that we have a policy of not evicting tenants who may be, in financial difficulty, but are actually in contact with the council. So there would be no one evicted if they're already liaising with the council and trying to, come up to date with their rent if they're struggling. And the services that we do provide, if we provide the money advice service for council tenants, I think there's over 500,000 has been gained for our tenants who've used the service for things that they might not have claimed for, or things that they might have been paying for that they could get cheaper and things like that. So the money that they pay for the rent, it isn't just for receiving, you know, sort of the maintenance side of things, which is really important, and not just for the rent of the building. It's also the other services that are around that where our tenants, who might be, some of them who can be quite vulnerable, that they also receive support from their housing officers to actually maintain their tenancy, so we can keep them in a secure home and have a better chance at life. You know, as for not paying rent for somewhere after you've paid off the housing, I think that is feasible. It wouldn't happen in the private sector, and I don't think it would happen in the social sector. I don't think that is a feasible answer, that if once that house is paid off that people stop paying rent, if that's what you were inferring. I think also, you know, I don't know whether people realise that kitchens and bathrooms also get replaced on a regular basis as well. There's a timescale for that. So whether that's 10 years or 14 years, that those kitchens, bathrooms will be replaced, as you would expect, because they get worn out. So, you know, people who are already in the house will ensure that they get a new bathroom, new kitchen, new windows, new fencing, that they, you know, have paid for over a longer period of time. Their rent has gone towards that, but the people within those houses already are getting those things. And I think that's, you know, really important. Also, we've got the 30-year development plan, which builds new houses that we desperately need, ensures that we also, you know, come up to Welsh housing quality standards with our existing stock, but also we're future-proofing our new houses, so that we'll need less repairs, because and also they'll have the heat source pumps. And also, if you look at what Welsh Government have want us to build more houses, but they also want us to introduce the Welsh housing quality standards, and we have to have the funding for that, and the housing revenue account pays for both those things. The money goes towards that, which also, you know, sort of ensures that the people who are existing tenants get a good quality service with the maintenance and the various support that they get, but also the people on the housing waiting list actually get the chance of a decent home at an affordable price. So I think the housing revenue account at 4.3% is actually a fair amount, and would, you know, we wouldn't want to see our tenants struggling, but 4.3% I think is a fair amount of what we charge, considering we're one of the lowest sort of charges of rent within the area. So yeah, that's my point.
Thank you, Councillor Perks, and sorry again for missing you out. Councillor Mark Hooper, please.
Diolch, Deputy Mayor. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm just going to be very brief. Firstly, just to associate myself with the comments that Councillor Ian Johnson made earlier. But just a point on scrutiny. There's a reason we had a really good conversation at scrutiny the other day. The leader was in attendance at that meeting. And the points that were made were there to help this council to make the right decision with regard to the housing revenue account. And the data we asked for is something that would help that. I think we were asking for comparative data, which is important, but also data going back over years in relation to how council tenants thought about affordability. The premise of that is that we could have people who are finding it less affordable than they were 10 years ago, 8 years ago, whatever, 5 years ago. The leader often bemoans the fact that people don't contribute at scrutiny committees. We did to aid this council, and yet we don't have that data here tonight to support this decision. My position remains as it was then when I voted against the position of the HRA, mainly because of the points that have been raised across this chamber by others and Dr. Johnson tonight in relation to whether or not we're actually putting the biggest burden on those who are least capable of affording this, and therefore we shouldn't have gone to the maximum. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gwyn John, next.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd just like to remind members that those tenants can also access housing benefit, as many of them do. In fact, I believe last year we were told in the regions of 75 to 80% access council housing benefit. So subsequently, it's not all doom and gloom. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor John. I think it is okay to go back to you now, Leader.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just to come through with a few responses. I think if I go back many years, well before the council was building houses, then it was a very simplistic arrangement where people rented houses and the rent covered the maintenance of houses and their rent. But actually, in 2012, in the new administration there, the administration inherited a situation where there were families in bed and breakfast, where the stock was old and unmaintained. And the person sitting on my right was the cabinet member at that time and vowed to start building houses. I can also remember going into one property and actually saying, actually, this doesn't look homely enough, and going out and buying a bunch of flowers and, to welcome the people into their new property. We stopped locating people in bed and breakfast until we hit the pandemic. And our ambition was to stop that again, and we have. Our ambition is to make sure that people have good quality homes for life, if that's what they need. And I was only thinking about that when I received an invitation to go and have a look at a new extra care facility that's being built in Penarth. And it's actually just behind the house I was born in, which was a fairly new council house at that time. And I'm really looking forward to going to visit that, because it demonstrates what we're doing, is that we are providing homes. And, you know, I admit one of my favourite films is It's a Wonderful Life. I have to watch it at least once every Christmas. And there are some good comments in that when there's a run on the bank and he says, no, that's not the way it works, he said to some of the people there. Your money's in that house. And that person's money is in your house. And we're not going to foreclose. This is actually the ambition of this council, that we will provide good quality homes for life for people. And that needs a slightly different model, because actually what we're doing is we're funding the borrowing costs. And it means that if somebody is in a 3-bedroom house now that they've outgrown, or that, sorry, their family have gone and they no longer need it, that it might be that there's an accessible property that's been built recently that they might be able to move into. And for that, you actually need a different model. So I'm pleased that our rental of our properties is 30% lower than the private sector. And I'm also pleased that it's lower than our RSL partners. But I recognise that although we make our service charges match exactly what it costs, our rents have to reflect our ambitions under the housing business plan. And for that reason, again, I move these recommendations. Thank you, Mayor.
Right, I think everybody who wanted to speak has spoken. So I'm not sure you're allowed to come back again.
I'm just asking for a recorded
Oh,
vote,
yes.
please.
Yes. So we'll move to a vote.
Yeah, the vote's ready, so people are voting. We'll keep an eye to make sure that everybody's voted, if you let us know, Amy. Yeah, all in?
I think all the votes are in. No? Okay, that's been approved.
Show the results because it was recorded.
The results are on the screen if you'd like to have a look. Okay. So that's the end of the third special meeting. So we now move on to the final special council meeting. So we don't need to do apologies of absence again. We do have declarations of interest. So just to clarify, this is to do with the replacement local development plan. Are there any people who'd like to declare? Yes, Councillor Susan Lloyd-Selby.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll declare in relation to this item because I'm an independent member of Cardiff and Vale Health Board, who are a statutory consultee. The nature of my interest is personal, not prejudicial, so I will remain in the meeting. Thank you.
I don't think anybody else has any declarations. So we'll now consider the proposal regarding the Vale of Glamorgan Deposit Replacement Local Development Plan for 2021-2036. Councillor Ruba Sivanianam, the Cabinet Member responsible, will take us through it.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm pleased to present this report to Council on the Vale of Glamorgan's Deposit Replacement Local Development Plan for 2021-26. I'm seeking approval for its publication for consultation. This represents an important achievement in this whole process in the shaping of the future of our communities, ensuring that we have sustainable growth, delivering homes, jobs and infrastructure that our residents need. The deposit RLDP has been developed through a series of stages with extensive engagement with stakeholders and residents throughout. In September 2024, full council approved the Sustainable Growth Strategy, which set out the vision and objectives for the Vale's future. It also established the planned levels of growth of spatial distribution, the spatial distribution of development. Full council has since endorsed the key sites to accommodate this growth, including the most recent decision last December regarding housing sites in Barry. Now, the deposit plan builds on the previous work, setting out detailed policies that respond to climate and nature emergencies, promote placemaking and improve the health and well-being of our residents. It identifies some additional sites for housing that will help meet overall housing requirements and deliver affordable housing, as well as identifying land for other uses such as community facilities, retail, employment and active travel. If approved today, the deposit plan will move to the next formal stage, and members should be clear that this deposit RLDP is not the final plan. This report is to seek approval for public consultation on the plan as a whole, not just the sites, but also the wider policy framework that sits behind it. It is an opportunity for all stakeholders, including residents, to give their views. And these representations will be considered and reported back to full council before an independent examination of the RLDP by an inspector. At place scrutiny last week, there was a lot of discussion from elected members about the plan. And I'd like to thank the speaker who attended, as well as the local residents who submitted written representations. These concerns are important, and we understand that the new development will place demands on infrastructure. However, I do believe that this plan sets the policy framework which will respond to these concerns, with developers being required to fund any necessary mitigation, such as school places, strategic highway improvements or community facilities. So I would urge members today to allow us to proceed to the public consultation to hear the views of residents. So I would move.
Thanks.
Thank you. Do we need someone to second at this stage?
I'm just trying to.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, happy to second, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Stephen Haynes, please.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. It's a point of order. Data is important. Accuracy is important. This document holds a number of inaccurate statements. The ones I notice, of course, are referring to St Athan train station. I can happily take you through a few. Just get it up. 611, a new station and bus train interchange at St Athan. 6422, where a new station at St Athan is proposed. 9.511, South Wales Metro rollout, a new rail station at St Athan. 9.7.6, new station at St Athan. And it goes on. Option 4 is all about new stations, proposed stations at St Athan. This is inaccurate. There is no proposal for a train station at St Athan. There is no station at St Athan, and as I pointed out to Place Committee yesterday, a few days ago, that Transport for Wales are blocking it, and there is no money from national government. So I'm asking you, Chair, to have the record corrected on this. Mayor, sorry, Deputy Mayor, have the record corrected on this.
Okay, I've been advised that that's a matter of judgment, and these comments are the sorts of comments that people are welcome to make during the consultation.
It's not a matter of judgment, Deputy Mayor. The officers know what the facts are. I've seen the facts. I've got FOIs. The facts are there. And to say that there is a proposed station at St Athan is not factual. And to put it in a document that comes across this council is just incorrigible, really.
Yes, please.
Yeah, if I can help on this point, I think the LDP, by its very nature, is a forward-looking document. It contains a lot of proposals. It contains proposals about where housing is going to go. It contains proposals as to what transport infrastructure is going to be improved. As a consequence, they are just that. They are proposals. So the LDP would propose that there is a new station in St Athan. That's my reading of it. Now, whether all the housing development sites come forward, whether they come forward in the plan period, whether a new station comes forward in a plan period, that is a matter for debate. It is a matter for assessment. And I would conclude that if any person or organisation or group of people feel that there is a doubt that that might happen, those are the type of comments that should be made as part of the consultation. That would be my view. I
disagree wholeheartedly. It's got a time span, this has. I've made my point of order, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you.
I leave you to rule on it.
Well, I think there are lots of things in the RLDP that aren't actually there yet. That's the nature of the document, I suppose. So, can I go on to the next speaker? Councillor Kevin Marnie, please.
Thank you. Yes, I think I can touch on a similar topic, to be honest with you. I mean, you keep going on about these infrastructure will be provided by SO 106 and by developers. Well, on so many cases, they don't. We spoke at the previous meeting in regards to lack of doctors, dentists or whatever. At the very least, it was pointed out at the time, something we all knew. I thought, well, the way it was presented, well, it's not the local authorities' place to provide doctors. We're not responsible for that. Well, that's quite correct. But you haven't even put any figures through of having contacted the local practices within areas. I'm talking about the Bendrickshire, which butts straight onto my ward, but it could apply to any area, of course. And asked what is their capacities? Are they at capacity? What capacity they have for new doctors and practices? You're not providing any. The developers don't seem to be providing any practices for a practice to move into. So where do you think a new doctor's practice is going to come to? Road infrastructure. Well, that's a big joke. You only have to look at the Cog Road in Surrey for that. Their total road infrastructure for 600 new houses so far has been one very small lane that the odd car can turn left at the bottom of Cog Road. And they're just dangerous country lanes leading up to an estate of that size, which is due to be expanded even further. So keep coming out with this glib, the developers will be providing infrastructure here, there. This infrastructure, in all too many cases, never appears. So how can you possibly just, we'll have this year, we'll have so many houses there, yeah, developers this, school places there, when these don't arrive in so many cases. And you as a council, as I've just demonstrated or pointed out, you haven't even given us any figures or anybody any figures on doctor surgeries, their current capacities, and what they feel they can expand to, if at all. So, I mean, yet again, incomplete nonsense as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marnie. Councillor Anthony Ernest, next.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Yes, I'm glad Councillor Marnie raised the question of the Bendrick Sully. I had the pleasure of representing Sully for quite some years, and I know, as he does, that the Bendricks is a remote location at the end of a road that leads to nowhere. Basically, the road leads into Barry Docks. There is a new housing development there, a very nice one that the Vale has recently provided. But of course, it didn't provide anything other than new houses. And there are no facilities whatsoever at the end of Hayes Road at all. And from my point of view, providing additional housing at the location without any sort of improved infrastructure is something that this council should not have been looking at. And I personally feel that that site should not have been included. But may I just turn to one other site, and that's land to the northeast of Dinas Powys, or the southwest of Penarth, or however you want to phrase it. Basically, it's off the road leading from Landock down to Eastbrook, and the proposal for several hundred houses there, with the only access out onto Cardiff Road. Now, anybody who's come from Barry towards Cardiff in the morning will know that the queues stretch way back through Dinas Powys. The Dinas Powys bypass was dumped by this Labour administration after all the efforts that the Conservatives made to get it in and provide a decent bypass for Dinas Powys so that the residents there wouldn't be affected by fumes and traffic, as well as commuters having exactly the same problems. And now we're proposing a new housing site on Greenfields, really to the land below Landock Hospital, is the way I see it. And I think that's another site that really is open to development. And I'm sure that officers will tell me that we've got the opportunity to talk about this again. But may I remind Council that this plan is up for approval tonight. Under recommendation 2A, it's approval of the RDLP. Under recommendation 2B, it's approval of the RDLP again. And I think that if we allow this to go forward, it'll be exactly the same as the previous RDLP some years ago, where a number of sites was slipped in at the very last moment into the RDLP, which had been bitterly opposed by so many, and yet they got into the scheme and to this day now are being developed. So, Chairman, I'm totally against the proposals as they stand on the grounds of at least 2 of the housing developments contained within the plan. Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ernest. I think what we're being asked to do is approve the consultation this evening. Next, Councillor Ian Johnson.
Thank you very much. I'll just wait to ensure that everybody has their headphones on here in the chamber. Great, okay, I'll start. I'd like to begin by congratulating the staff of the Planning Department specifically for developing the current plan. I appreciate that it's the fruit of years of work to get to this point, and so I do, as I say, appreciate this. But we're not settled for good with further improvement as possible. The purpose of an LDP is to manage development in the county, specifically the use of land for housing and employment, and to ensure that we are not exploited by those acting in bad faith. Therefore, a plan is needed. But we also must create a balance which is difficult, identifying land sites for housing and developing those sites in a suitable way. I would like to draw attention to the new timetable, the delivery agreement for the RLDP. In the original discussion regarding the timetable, when I was expecting the process to be completed in 2025, I noted a lack of opportunity for the public to comment on the plan because it was councillors in the years 2022 up to 27, which is this current council, who are going to be deciding on the plan. Now the timetable has been extended, and the new timetable before us has been extended once again until after the 2027 election, because of the need for an inspector to revise the plan before it can be adopted by the council. This raises the possibility, as we saw back in 2017, and in 2012, of a party campaigning strongly against the plan during the election, promising to revise or even scrap the plan, as Labour promised back in 2012, and then the Tories in 2017. In 2017, after winning an election, indeed, under the banner of LDP rejection, the Conservatives passed the plan unanimously in Council, vehemently following the example of Wrexham County Council, a position that was supported eventually in the courts. So we will have to look as a council very carefully upon that judgment and any legislative changes by the Welsh Government in the meantime, because by now we are hostages to fortune by the changes in that it has been pushed to after the next election once again. Moving on to the plan itself then, the Vale of Glamorgan is part of the South East Wales growth zone. As is clear from the population growth, which has been significant in recent years, more as a percentage indeed than any other area of Wales. I'll let others argue whether this is caused by the number of houses built here or whether that was a result, whether it was a cause or a consequence. But we heard last week that the relevant local development plan is not to be adopted until 2032. So this should be just in time for our next plan. This is taking a very long time to reach us. As we scrutinise the plan itself, there are clear questions to be asked. Are we building the right number of houses in the right places, and are they of the right size? Ahead of Christmas, a projection was unveiled by Welsh Government regarding the number of homes needed in the vicinity. Half of these, in the next decade, will be single-person households. Perhaps not one-bedroom houses, but with one single occupant. Also, the increase in our older population, specifically those who are over 75 years of age, with this consequential impact it will have on social care provision, and a society which is accessible to the generation. I understand, of course, the work that goes into creating a plan, identifying specific sites, whether or not you agree with every single one of them. But even so, if we accept the projection for the growth of multiple households and the type of housing needed, how will the plan address the need for a one-person household instead of the larger houses, which is severally favoured by private developers? In response to the consultation Housing Growth in Barry, I asked in the last meeting, compared to the large number of people on the waiting list for social housing in the county, how many are in real need? A smaller number were revealed in this situation, around 900 out of 4,000 who are currently on the list in Barry. So how many people are in true need across the county? Because for me, ensuring suitable household for everyone is the real need for this plan, not the needs of the private developers. And this is a matter of policy. Thank you very much. A last question from me then. How would we, as a council, respond to the consultation if this is not favourable of the plan that we have? How will we get to grips with that after the consultation period has come to an end? Thank you.
Next, Councillor Stephen Haynes. No, that was a point of order, so he's allowed to contribute. He's taken his hand down anyway. So, Councillor Janice Charles, thank you.
No, I got my hands up, Chair.
Oh, sorry.
I've been on screen. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Okay. I will start with a quote. We're not going to plough through farmland. Keir Starmer, that was last week. Prime Minister question time in response to a question on building on green fields. That statement reflects a clear Labour manifesto commitment to prioritise brownfield and greyfield sites and to protect greenfield and agricultural land. I fully accept the housing policy is devolved, but there is nothing in the Welsh Labour Senate manifesto that contradicts this position. In fact, its emphasis is firmly on town regeneration, not building over farmland. Nor, should I add, was large-scale greenfield development mentioned in Labour's council election material, at least not in St Athan. This document now describes itself as evidence-based, yet key parts of the evidence simply do not stand up to scrutiny. It claims that St Athan has good transport links, 1 bus an hour, relying heavily on proposed train station, which is neither justified nor deliverable without UK government and Transport for Wales support, which it doesn't have. The document itself concedes this, as language quietly shifts from rail station to a vague transport link. So we move from imaginary trains to imaginary buses. And what is really being proposed? In practice, nothing more than a car park. Employment is another pillar of the justification. So yet, evidence is weak. So let me give you some actual figures. Population of St Athan has risen from 3,836 in 2001 to around 4,728 in 2024. This continues to grow due to large-scale developments. This plan would see further increase of population around 40 to 50% from current levels. Employment tells a different story. In 1990, the MOD and the RAF site provided around 4,000 jobs. By 2010, with Dara online, it was up to 5,000. Today, Broad Tathan employs about 1,000, with perhaps 75 additional jobs expected in the medium term. Aberthaw Power Station employed 300 before it was closed, yet none are proposed during the lifespan of this document. There's a net loss of 4,000 jobs, along with the construction of roughly 700 houses, and that figure does not include the 500 plus former military homes already in the village. The plan also proposes further social housing in St Athan, which we've had quite a lot already. But these two new sites, one alongside and one behind East Vale, one is an ex-stadium site allowed to fall into dereliction by its owner, the Welsh Government. The other is a valued greenfield space used by locals from at least the 1970s. People living there do not need to be surrounded by more housing. What they actually need is basic infrastructure, starting with a local shop. So to conclude, Keir Starmer is against building on farmland. Labour campaigned on brownfield and greyfield development, not greenfield loss. St Athan Community Council and most residents of St Athan are opposed to this document. I'm opposed to it, and we hope our fellow St Athan councillor is also. and they would be right to be, because these developments are justified by flawed employment data and a transport strategy built around infrastructure that does not exist. So I urge fellow councillors to reject this document, and I urge Labour councillors in particular to vote in line with your party's stated values and to protect our countryside. Thank you, Deputy.
Thank you, Councillor Haynes. I think I'll take this opportunity to remind people that this is exactly the sort of comment that people will be invited to make during the consultation. Right, next, Councillor Janice Charles.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I'm opposed to the proposals because of the development on North of Port Road West, Waycock Cross, on the following grounds. The proposed development extends the boundary of Barry in a southerly and westerly direction and therefore increases the town of Barry. This increase is a direct encroachment into the countryside. The proposed development has a visual impact to the neighbours surrounding the development, especially south of Port Road. I'm of the belief that this development therefore extends the precise boundary of Barry into the countryside and encroaches into the green belt around Barry. This development will have an adverse effect on the residential amenity of neighbouring properties. They would be adversely affected, and the development would also affect the residential amenity of the present owners of Nanttalwg and Cwmtalwg and the surrounding areas. The present infrastructure cannot cope, in my opinion, with the development of properties within the Vale. The road infrastructure is presently at breaking point with the continued development of properties within the Vale. The A4226, known as Port Road, is forever full and not only at peak times, and has been the scene of a number of accidents and hold-ups. The main fire station and ambulance depot is situated on this road, and there are times when the emergency services have difficulties moving along this road. These developments could have a drastic effect if the emergency service required to use this road. Other roads in the area are continually busy, especially in the summer period with visitors to Barry Island. As previously mentioned, there are concerns about highway safety along Port Road, with accidents, some fatal. Pedestrian movement at both high schools are situated alongside this busy main road, which means there is considerable pedestrian access. The A4226 has a built capacity of 21,000 vehicles per day. And in 2012, a survey estimated that this was at 27,000. This has obviously increased due to developments in the Vale from 2012 to present day. The only plans that we have heard to alleviate the problems in some local changes to the roundabout at Waycock Cross, which does not alleviate the problems along the entire length of the A4226. There will be additional pressure on the already overloaded medical practices. Expecting the NHS to solve the problem is unrealistic when you consider the already overloaded medical practices. I am concerned that the ecological impact on Waycock Cross housing development will have a detrimental effect on the bats, mammals and other wildlife. It is unrealistic to suggest that access to Barry Railway Station on foot from Waycock Cross development is an acceptable method for children, mums, elderly or disabled, and the return journey is more difficult because of the 200-foot uphill climb. I believe the evidence given does not comprehensively deal with the facts of the Waycock Cross development locality, only the benefits of this site being developed. I would like evidence from the NHS, ambulance, fire department, police, bus service before one could really establish this. This is to make sure that this is a viable project, and I don't think it is at the moment with the bus services, etc., and other things that have been mentioned. Therefore, I will not be supporting these proposals.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. I've got 4 more speakers on my list and 2 more hands have gone up, so that's 6. So next on the list is Councillor Samantha Campbell.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I am against these plans. In Bruce, we don't have the infrastructure, and I've spoken quite extensively about this previously. But the points that I wanted to raise tonight is, if this is put forward for approval for public consultation, how are we going to make sure that the public actually engage in this consultation process? The public and our residents have become rather disillusioned with the consultation process by the Vale of Glamorgan Council. We have seen that people just aren't engaging. In regards to the Waycott Cross proposals that were put forward, we only saw, I think it was 129 comments that came through. We need to actually get people to engage. We do have people that are living in digital poverty in the Vale of Glamorgan, our elderly residents and other people who aren't online, who aren't able to actually access our consultation processes. All of us as councillors, I like to believe we are putting things out on our social media, and we are pushing, our consultations as far as we can to our residents. But how are we actually going to make sure that people are aware these things are happening, and that we're actually getting people to put comments through, to put objections through, to put messages through of support if that's what they want to do? But we need to make sure that people are aware this is happening, and that their thoughts and their voices are heard. As much as we are the voice for our residents, we need to make sure that they're put through as well. We have spoken extensively about getting people to engage in scrutiny processes. Councillor Sivan Yaram spoke earlier this evening about how she was grateful that people had come and spoke at the scrutiny as well on this issue. But we need to make sure that consultations are fulfilled and that people are actually speaking and leaving comments on them as well.
Thank you. Next, Councillor Michael Morgan.
Yes, sure. There are a lot of strong feelings about the plans, but as the Deputy Mayor has reminded us on a number of occasions so far, we're not making any decisions tonight. We're simply deciding whether this goes to consultation or not. And Councillor Campbell's hit the nail on the head. It's our role as councillors to get people to engage in the consultation, and it's the office of the council to assist in getting it out there, because it is right. People are deplorable in responding to consultations. You often get a response rate of about 1 or 5%, and that's not representative of the people in the Vale. So our role, I think, is to get people engaged for the benefit of their own communities. And just picking up on a comment from Councillor Johnson, a councillor for whom I have enormous respect, but it is worrying to learn that this matter might be decided on the basis of who's going to vote for whom at the next elections. In the past, that local politics should not be dominated by party politics in any event. So I think we should just carry on tonight, get this matter out for consultation and find a means to get people to engage in the consultation. And the matter will eventually be decided by our successors, whoever they may be, after the 2027 election. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Mark Wilson.
Yeah, thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. I just think we've been rather premature at the moment in terms of going into detail about possible plan applications or potential plan applications. And really, we're not looking at any plan applications, as you know. And when we do have plan applications, we can condition them. We can put in things in to mitigate any kind of issues. And I think that's what a lot of discussion has been made today. But remember, by having an LDP gives us teeth. If we don't have the LDP, we as a council don't have teeth. Therefore, we'll be subject to speculative development across the Vale. That will also weaken our countryside. It will weaken our landscapes, it will weaken our town centres, and it will weaken the opportunity for more affordable housing. And it will weaken the opportunity for further improved infrastructure. So we need a structure, we need a framework. And I think it's important that we then, after this meeting, hopefully we will support this, We encourage the community to participate. And as Councillor Campbell rightly said, and I totally agree with her, and that was echoed by Councillor Morgan, that really it's incumbent upon all of us to speak about the LDP, not just in areas that are local to it, but also across the Vale, because it affects the whole Vale. Because it's not just about residential, it's about employment sites and it's about other areas. Therefore, I fully support us going up to consultation.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Hooper.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm going to be brief. The first thing I just want to point out is a point of process. There was a point in the process in December when the Waycott Cross development came to this council. We lost by 1 vote. None of the local councillors voted on the matter, or 1 abstained. 2 of the others weren't in the room, so they didn't vote. So hearing Councillor Charles saying tonight why she disagreed with it, I think she had the chance to do something about that at that time. Go on, Councillor Charles, you want to make some point?
Yes, due to the inaccurate article on that point that
I'm
was
sorry, and I've been told unless it's a point of order, Councillor Charles.
Well, it's a point of order when you have been wrongly accused, and as a consequence, you had no end of emails sent to you, which were quite nasty because of the inaccuracy that Ian Johnson's article was in the paper.
Is there a specific point of order? I thought Councillor Hooper was saying you weren't present for the...
Yes, and I think it's wrong to say that I wasn't present without him knowing the facts. I've been here nearly 25 years. That was the only full council meeting I have ever missed, and the reason I missed it was I was severely ill with pneumonia.
Okay, I'm sorry to hear that. Councillor Mark Hooper, have you finished your point?
I haven't, but thank you. I was just giving way because I thought it would be appropriate. So there was a process. We're in the middle of that process, and tonight is the time when we're talking about the consultation part of that process. I want to associate myself with the remarks made by Councillor Campbell. They were exactly the same things that I was saying, as I said in the Place Scrutiny Committee this week. And I still don't feel confident that we're going to get the sort of consultation that we need that will make the difference, that will be heard. This is a process, as we'll find out when it comes to a vote at the moment. This is very politicised. We will notice that the parties will vote on political lines. And the one thing that's most disturbing for those people who are watching on from this debate is that they feel like they're not being listened to. In a time of very febrile politics, that's a really dangerous place to be. There's been some excellent points made in different, at the Place Scrutiny Committee when we looked at this Waycott Cross development prior to this, where we had people from the community making points that were very well developed, but ultimately they'll be just ignored and they won't be put forward and they won't be changed. We had a chance to change it, and it's disappointing that it's not. So I would urge the council to make sure that the consultation process is one that actually encourages all people to get involved in it. One of the groups that's often left out are those people who come from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. And I would urge the council to rethink how they make sure that those communities are considered properly in this and feel like their voices are heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor George Carroll.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Mayor. As I explained at the Place Scrutiny Committee last week, I believe that the replacement local development plan, as things stand, is flawed. I cited several reasons for this, including the site to the northeast of Dinas Powys, which sits on Cardiff Road. This site is close to the Berry Harrier Junction, which is currently affected by several serious road safety matters. It is a matter of deep concern to me that adding potential development on this in this area will exacerbate this and lead to this matter becoming even worse. As other members have explained this evening, there are several other pitfalls within the plan as things stand. I therefore do not consider it appropriate to go out to consultation with these flaws in place, and as such, I shall be voting against. There is one other point I would like to raise this evening, Madam Deputy Mayor. It's something that hasn't been touched upon so far in the debate, and that is that overdevelopment is a consequence of unsustainable population growth. Now, we can be mistaken at times into thinking that major cities bear the brunt of these consequences, but it is wrong to think that the Vale will be unaffected. We are, after all, Madam Mayor, one nation. Our population is highly mobile. Population increases in one place leads to dispersals into others. If people move out of one place due to pressures on the housing area, on the housing stock, this then leads to pressures in the Vale of Glamorgan. And if I draw members' attention to paragraph 3.16 of the deposit plan, this refers to a long-term migration trend of people moving between Cardiff and the Vale. Separately, Madam Deputy Mayor, I wish to touch on the pressures that temporary housing stock faces. Paragraph 3.19 refers to the need for sufficient permanent affordable housing to assist in moving people out of temporary accommodation. It says that this is critical. That same paragraph also cites the reasons for this, one of which includes the Council's commitment in respect of resettlement programmes, and I think it's important to put that onto the record. Now, I accept, Madam Deputy Mayor, that immigration policy is outside of this Council's remit. However, given the effects that it has on services and on other things which are within the Council's remit, it's important that the authority makes this clear in discussions and communications that it has with central government. Unfortunately, this authority does the opposite. For example, its support for the county and nation of sanctuary policies, both of which create significant pull factors. Well, members may shout from sedentary positions, but it's important to have a reasoned debate on this matter and to make clear that there are implications of various policies and the knock-on effects that these can have on other areas. So I will reiterate my call for these policies to be dropped. But to conclude, Madam Deputy Mayor, as I've stated already, the replacement local development plan as stands is flawed. It would be a futile exercise consulting on it at this stage. I believe we need to go back to the drawing board and start again, and so I shall be voting against.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. We've got two more speakers. Councillor Anne Asprey, please.
Thank you. I'm going to speak in Cymraeg.
I'm speaking tonight as a county councillor for Dinas Powys, but I'm also here as a community councillor in Dinas Powys, where the LDP is a sore subject. Originally, there were 2 sites in Dinas Powys, but one in Argyle Lane was withdrawn after harsh criticism. There are worries regarding the 250 proposed homes in the east of Dinas Powys. Remember that there was a substantial development in Dinas Powys during the current plan, and this was on the old St Cyrus school site, Llawn Road, and also next to Brynadon. The site in the far east of Dinas Powys is not a natural extension to the village. It faces Cardiff, and it's very far from the facilities. It is served by only one road in and out of Cardiff Road. Safe and accessible roads are difficult for people to walk or cycle from the site because the pavement on Cardiff Road is very narrow. As a result of this, it's difficult to provide a pavement that is sufficiently wide for buggies or scooters. We have already requested a lift at East Brook Station because of the current accessibility restrictions crossing the line. Other services are also needed, for example, doctor surgeries and a dentist. Recently, Dinas Powys had a need to accept 1,000 patients from Penarth because a surgery closed there. We are unable to accept more residents with fewer services to serve them. This may be something that remains out of the hands of the Vale of Glamorgan's councillors, but the provision of this service is important. Since 2020, Dinas Powys has faced repeated flooding. This has happened time and time again, and new housing raises concerns about this getting worse. We are concerned about the impact of the development and that it will raise this risk even higher. A number of people are still waiting for flood defences. Therefore, we need to be persuaded that is not something that's getting worse as a result of the building of an additional 250 homes on this site. Because of this, I will be voting against the RLDP tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Liz Burnett.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to clarify, this is a strategic plan. A strategic plan that goes over a number of years and is in development. As we've said, it talks about housing, it talks about employment, it looks at infrastructure that we have control over, like education. And I think an awful lot of people have seen the house building programme that's been going on, not house building, school building programme that's been going on in this county since 2012. I think it was 18 new schools at the last count. I think members do residents a disservice by suggesting that we have health infrastructure in our control. We lobby, we work with our partners, we talk to them in PSB and RPB, but ultimately they have their own strategic plan for health infrastructure. We also heard at length and on 2 occasions, although I thought we could only speak once, about the feasibility funding that's been agreed in the regional transport plan. And I was really pleased about that. I'm vice chair of the regional transport subcommittee, and we argued, we have lobbied UK government, we have lobbied Welsh government, we have lobbied Transport for Wales, and it was constantly falling between the pillars. And to actually achieve the transport funding or the feasibility funding for a transport interchange, and it is a transport interchange because when it was looked at, it was decided that you actually need somewhere that people can either come to from the rural Vale in a car or on a bus and get onto a faster train or vice versa. You can't just have something in the middle of nowhere without other facilities around it. And that's what the feasibility study will look at. What the outcome of that will be, I don't know. But it's happening now. And it's happening because of relentless lobbying. But I think what I want to say is, if we don't provide correct information to our residents, pretending that we can wave a magic wand and create health facilities in this chamber, we can't. We have plans to work in partnership with the Health Board, and we hope to take those forward. We have worked hard on those plans, and we will continue discussing them again this week. But we are not in control of that. And by sitting here and revisiting discussions that have already happened in this chamber, we're doing a disservice to our residents, because they deserve to have their voice. They deserve for this to go out to consultation. And people said, how are they going to find out? Well, actually, they're your residents. Why don't you go and tell them? Why don't we talk to people? An awful lot of us have actually talked to people about previous iterations of LDPs. That's part of our role as elected members. And if you look at the revised dates, there's the consultation, and that then comes back here and we discuss the outcomes of that consultation. And then we are completely able to make submissions as part of the RLDP examination, either as a council or as individual members. So it basically means before the end of this term, there are 2 more opportunities to talk in depth and make cases for this plan. And I know that in the last examination, there were changes made as a result of submissions. If we push this back now, we will lose those opportunities within this administration, and we will hand it over to whoever is in the next administration. And I actually think that our residents need an opportunity to make their voices heard now, and that is why I will be supporting this.
Diolch. Councillor Elliott Penn.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Whenever we have any infrastructure plans put before us, before this council, they're the same voices who are always against any plans, anything being built. Opposition. Without any alternative proposals, just default opposition. It's disappointing, really. Do they suggest we do nothing at all when we have such a large housing shortage? Do they just suggest we do nothing about that? It would be nice to have alternative proposals, just default opposition. The deposit RLDP is to be agreed here to go out to consultation, positive or negative, but here to go out to consultation. And we should listen to all the people's views, positive or negative. Just to pick up on what was mentioned earlier and in the placemaking plan, I know it's supported by some members. The Dinas Powys bypass, which was referred to being scrapped by this council, the supporters are always quite quiet about the negative impacts on the peoples whose homes would have been alongside the bypass, or actually the negative impacts on the village where I live, and some of the local community infrastructure. Research has shown that the environment that you grew up in, that you live in, has a direct impact on your attainment, your life chances. So when we build, let's build with imagination, creativity, and sustainability, and all with the environment at the forefront of any of our plans. Thank you, Chair, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ian Perry.
Hi, good evening. The Cabinet today, or the Cabinet member today, talked about the mitigation of the expected problems or the developments proposed in the RLDP when the planning applications come forward. Mitigation normally means a little bit of an S106 contribution, contributions that are somewhat unbalanced in first providing more money for more housing before the money comes forward for sustainable travel and community amenities. And we do desperately need to look at how we collect and then spend S106 money. Of course, if we were to properly plan and take examples from the Netherlands and Germany, there'd be no need for mitigation of the disbenefits of development. The RLDP, or the Really Large Developers Plan, is a plan for the really large developers. That is perhaps no better or worse than if we had no plan and speculative developments came forward. Because if they put their speculative developments forward now, they get in the RLDP. So what's the difference? And we're spending time here needlessly because they just do what they were going to do anyhow. Because after all, they're all driven by profit. And if we tell them to build somewhere it's not profitable, they ain't going to build there. And let's not forget the number of developers in the Vale Glamorgan that have gone into liquidation in the last few years, leaving developments unfinished. So infrastructure must come first. Railway stations opened before dwellings are built. This is what happens on the continent. Then new residents immediately have effective and efficient public transport available, so do not develop the habit of always using the private car. Residents of new developments should not need to own a car. We have a climate emergency, don't we? That always gets forgotten. And the need to move away from private transport into public transport and the development of active travel. We are years behind and we ain't moving in the right direction. The health infrastructure and service providers must provide capacity before the housing is built. They should not be trying to keep up with population increases. That is what planning is supposed to be about, isn't it? Planning ahead. Then there's the additional road traffic. I am told there will be a 6% increase at the peak times at Culverhouse Cross. Apparently, and I say this with disbelief, there is spare capacity at Culverhouse Cross, even though queues stretch back up Tumble Hill, back down the A4232, back down Cowbridge Road West, and down Michaelstone Road, where 600 homes are due to be built. And they're all going to drive a car. Was that 900 extra houses coming up? In defence of farming, the farming sector in Wales is something we should be concerned about. The ageing farmers. Mr. Clarkson's not the youngest person either who's just going to farming. Now, we talk about grades 3B being acceptable to build on, but that is just about the depth of soil. 2.2 million tonnes of topsoil is eroding each year in the UK. So where will our topsoil be a century from now? And I walk in places now where you can see the soil levels have dropped. I've got stiles which were at an acceptable height perhaps 30 years ago, which now you need a ladder to get over because the soil around them has eroded away. Public transport services through St Athan, Roos, Cowbridge, etc. are not good enough. We all know that. If I was to travel home tonight, I'd have to spend an hour waiting at Culverhouse Cross. The app tells me I have to go via Cardiff and get home at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. The services must be improved before additional housing is built. Transport for Wales needs to speed up implementation of its proposals and quickly build on these to make car owning or not owning a car viable. Because at the moment, many of us are completely dependent on our cars. I've lived car free. It was wonderful. But here in Wales, that is not an option to me and it's not an option to my residents. We need to move forward quickly. And that needs to come from the next Welsh Government, whoever controls the Senate as of May this year. So I think I've been under 5 minutes. I've not been told to be quiet. I've been very brief. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Councillor Chris Franks. Councillor Chris Franks, are you hearing us? Doesn't appear to be listening or hearing us. Oh,
can you hear me?
Yes, now, yeah.
Apologies for that. I am amazed that so many have called for a full consultation regarding these plans. Well, there have already been substantial opposition to many of these sites, including the 250 houses at Eastbrook. And these protests, these complaints have been totally and utterly ignored. I'm struggling to find any faith that we should have that would convince people that this process will respond to this opposition. And I think it's fair to say that this administration is not renowned for its listening abilities. So why will it be different this time? Why will the people in Eastbrook be listened to when they say that there's no adequate health facilities, there's no transport facilities, and the access onto the main road, the A4055 at Eastbrook, will cause dreadful problems. Why do you, can anyone tell me why they should believe that this will be a full and open process? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Franks. I think we're at the point where Councillor Sifanianam comes back.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And thank you, councillors, for all your contributions, many or most of which I've heard before and have even been answered in this chamber or by officers. However, I do hope you'll all be contributing to the consultation, because many of these issues are part of the consultation. But I will touch on two more points. I think firstly, Councillor Johnson, I think you really summarise what the RLDP is all about. It is striking a balance between our use of land, our need for housing, our need to look for, to protect our environment, to look to the climate and nature emergencies that we have. And I feel that this plan has hit that balance with the evidence to back it up. And lastly, I will comment on the consultation, and thank you to Councillors Campbell and Morgan and Hooper for raising this. Part of my portfolio is around consultation and engagement, and I am serious about reaching out to as many of our residents as possible. But I do expect my fellow councillors to do some of that legwork with those communities that we often don't hear from. So I reach out to councillors to do some of that legwork. And we are also doing work. My team, the 0.0, I think, before Councillor Carroll comes in, the 0.003%, I think, that's spent on my team around engagement. We are doing engagement with groups who are more disadvantaged and who don't usually participate in these things. But clearly there is more work to be done. So I would welcome, I would invite Councillor Hooper and Councillor Campbell to get in touch with me if you think we are missing opportunities to reach out to for other communities. So I would move that this report and plan goes for consultation, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Johnson.
Just to ask for a recorded vote, please.
Yes, lovely,
formally.
thank you. So we'll move to a recorded vote now. Mae'n barod, ready to go. I think Councillor Charles Champion may not have voted, but he's the only one. I don't know if you're still listening, Councillor Champion, but Right, we're closing the vote then. So the result is on the screens, and that brings this evening's meeting to a close. The next full council meeting is on Monday, the 9th of March. Diolch yn fawr, nos da. Sorry, did you not see the second page? I'm sorry.